to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, and on this episode, I am pumped to have Connor Allen on the show. He's an NFL prop betting expert, and he works with 4for4.com. Connor, welcome to the show.
Ed, appreciate you having me on. I think we do this, I don't know a couple times a year now at this point, maybe twice a year, something like that. It's always a good time chopping it up. We have had you on Move the Line a couple of times and always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely love keeping in touch with what you're doing, what your insights are. And I think the last time we talked, someone on the internet was like the best young NFL prop betting expert, Connor Allen. I think that's absolutely true. And can't wait to get your insights, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, there was actually, I don't know if we want to go too far down the rabbit hole in the internet here. I think someone in the industry made a play that I had already made, and someone commented on that play and was basically this came from Connor Allen, and then we're talking me up or whatever, which I thought was pretty funny because it was an older guy who's been in the industry for a long time who played that, and I don't know if he copied me or whatever, but imitation's the highest form of flattery. So I wasn't mad. My subs got in. I bet it before he got a worse number, so it's all good.
And this is probably an old famous person that won back-to-back super contests once upon a time. And...
Yep, that's the right person. Yep.
The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Rank Sports Betting Newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you. As 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. I don't just offer my bets, but also bets from sharp people like Connor Allen. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. Connor, would love to get your big takeaways from 3 weeks of the NFL season. What has surprised you? What has not surprised you? What are your biggest takeaways?
Yeah, I think I have a couple here, but right off the top, one that really surprised me would be how much, Dan Campbell influenced this Lions offense. And that's because, when they lost Ben Johnson, I was pretty worried about this offense. Jared Goff has largely been a sum of his parts quarterback for his entire career, basically. When he had Sean McVay, he was good. When he had Anthony Lynn at OC, he wasn't very good. When he had Jeff Fisher, he was not very good. But now he had a good supporting cast still, so I thought they could make it work, but would probably take a step back. So far, largely outside of the Packers game, I've been very much proven wrong about that. And I think something that I missed specifically, but is very interesting, is that after Anthony Lynn was fired and Dan Campbell took over in 2022, the Lions massively increased their play action rate to be one of the tops in the league. And that, was sticky through Ben Johnson's time and is now through John Morton as the offensive coordinator, which they hired from outside of the organization has continued. And so Jared Goff, while they didn't play well against the Packers week 1, no offense has really played well against the Packers so far. And I think that that's more indicative of them. The Lions absolutely shredded the Bears and put up a big number on a Ravens defense that I still think is pretty good and just hasn't played all that well. So I think that is a pretty interesting first couple of weeks here for Dan Campbell and this Lions offense.
No, that's great. I definitely, you brought up a little bit about Baltimore's defense, right? They kind of got gashed by Buffalo week 1, and then Detroit was really able to run on them, right? Which I found pretty interesting. I wasn't kind of expecting that, right? I thought Goff would have to do it. But you still think that Baltimore defense is solid?
Yeah, I mean, I want to believe that because if you go back and watch the Buffalo game, Josh Allen prior to the fourth quarter had 120 yards. He was averaging 6 yards, less than 6 yards per attempt. The first half, he wasn't doing anything, actually. I think he had 50 passing yards until that last drive where the Ravens just played shell with 20 seconds left, and he just kind of chucked it 15, 20 yards downfield because they were letting him. So there was 3 quarters in that game where he wasn't playing really well, then just became Superman in the fourth quarter and threw for 250 and shredded them. And so, but now this Lions game has me rethinking it a little bit. I still want to stand on the fact that I think that the Ravens defense could be good. They have the personnel to be good. They've been good in the past. So I don't want to give up on them yet. But yeah, I mean, the Lions are able to run on them, which led to other, successful facets of their game.
Awesome. Any other takeaways that you want to mention?
Yeah, I think one other one that seems to be just more and more apparent is how much offensive line play matters, more than ever right now. Because you have a team like the Texans teams like the Raiders, the Titans, just like they're struggling to run the ball a lot. The Texans right now just can't move the ball. The Raiders offensive line is really, really struggling. So you obviously, for the Raiders, you add Ashton Genty, you get a better quarterback at Geno Smith. You still have Brock Bowers. And it's not really clicking on all cylinders for them. They, have some of the lowest yards before contact in the league. And then the Texans offensive line, they reshuffled entirely, got 5 new starters, but none of the players were good. And so that's a problem, right? Like, so just because you replaced all the bad players with more bad players doesn't make it necessarily a good thing. And so it's made it really hard for CJ Stroud and this offense to get going between that and, Nick Caley not really, I think, being able to overcome some of the offensive line issues here. It's just, every year it astounds me of like, okay, well, you can make a case that CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and Christian Kirk, like that sounds like a pretty good, unit there, or formidable, trio of a passing game that can take a step forward. They draft Jalen Noel, draft Jaden Higgins, and it just like doesn't matter because the offensive line is so bad.
I mean, I used to think there was idea that you could scheme around a weak offensive line, right? Your tackles can't hold up against a good pass rusher, get the ball out quick. Is that, maybe you have to be one of the better offensive coordinators to make that happen, or you got to have the right personnel? Or is that idea kind of dead?
I think it's more dead than it used to be for a couple of reasons. Like, I think as we've seen like the evolution of passing and like passing in the league, like you saw secondaries kind of become like, I don't know, like leaner and wider, I guess, if that makes sense. So like instead of like having a bunch of guys up front and like teams who would come out pass heavy would be like, oh, like, you'd have linebackers on slot receivers and stuff. Like that doesn't really happen as much anymore.
Okay. Right.
Just because again, teams like defenses adapted. And so I think that part of the problem is that like if your offensive line is so bad that teams can get pressure with like 4, there's not a way to just like get the ball out quick because there's already so many guys in the secondary, right? So like,
sure,
I don't know that this is the exact correct answer. I'm just kind of theorizing that like, I don't think that it's quite as prevalent. Whereas before, like you could see teams like get away with, oh, we'll just, get the ball out super quick and like work it that way. I mean, you kind of see the Dolphins to some extent too. Like,
sure, yeah.
Tua last year, one of the quickest times to release, and they're like, we need to get the ball out quicker because their offensive line sucks so bad, and that just like doesn't work because if you don't have a great running game, if you don't have any threat of a downfield passing game, then it's tough to make all of that kind of come together.
Well, and defenses are adapting too, right? Taking away the deep passes, playing these shells. That's probably, and then if you can still get pressure with 4, then in some sense the offense has nowhere to go, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. You just like keep it in front of you, and then it's like it's really tough. It's kind of like it's the evolution in the NFL and like play calling and personnel and everything has continued to like shift and oscillate. And we saw, I think last year, almost things start to come back down to earth in terms of like teams are like, oh, we actually need to like stop the running game after the Eagles just like dominated so thoroughly in the trenches and with like kind of their throwback style running game to some extent. And that hasn't fully kind of swung back the other way, obviously, to like, early 2000s or anything like that. But it's certainly, I think, from where we were 7-8 years ago with the pass. Now it's like, it's just not all the same, it's not the same as it used to be.
For predicting offensive line, now that we know that it's so important, like what are you using? Like, are you watching games? Do you trust PFF grades? Like, how do you go about evaluating?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I'm, an expert in offensive line play. I think we, have only so much like, I don't know, brain power that we can focus on. So what I like to do is like lean on certain experts and certain expertise. So I like checking PFF grades. I think that's a good baseline. I definitely don't buy just like random PFF grades overall. Like, I don't know, like a running back or a receiver. Like, I think that it's not like I'm going to blindly trust that. But at the same time, offensive line play, I think it's a good starting point there. We have offensive line rankings at 4-for-4, and then established the runs. Brandon Thorne does a great job with his offensive line rankings as well. So I like to, some kind of blend of those three. You can get a pretty good picture of like, okay, who's good? What units are good? Are they good at run blocking? Are they good at pass blocking? Because those aren't always the same. And also like part of offensive line play, I think, is related to how long the quarterback holds the ball. So like Caleb Williams last year held the ball a ton, so long. And so like a lot of the sacks were on him. So I think there's like multiple moving parts here, but that's just generally how I get to the approach.
I did a little work a couple years ago looking at, both pressure rates allowed by offensive linemen and then PFF grades. And it turns out that the PFF grades were much more predictive because exactly the fact that you just mentioned, right? Like the pressure rate allowed is also on the quarterback. If you have a guy like Caleb Williams that holds onto the ball too much,
Totally.
there's
Yeah. I
nothing
mean,
there's nothing you can do.
yeah, right. Like it's a blend of both. Like I think there's like, quick pressures, like those are obviously like, not really on the quarterback. But also like you saw in the preseason game with Anthony Richardson when he got hurt with the Colts, like, the real like the hardcore ball knowers, I think it was like, I don't know, like old NFL players, things that were like, oh, actually like he should have shifted his offensive line to block that guy coming off the edge. And the fact that he got sacked, even though he couldn't see him and the guy was untouched, was like entirely his fault, because he didn't recognize it. So there's that whole
Interesting.
other layer too, as well, that like us as like outsiders that I think, know football pretty well, but probably not to that extent, maybe don't know. And it's like nearly impossible to quantify like what on a play to play basis should the quarterback have shifted the offensive line, which would have prevented that pressure, right?
We're gonna get back to Indianapolis in a little bit, but like, shouldn't someone be trying to trade for Anthony Richardson right now? Like, if you think this guy is legit, the fourth pick, still got potential, you should probably take advantage of the fact that Daniel Jones is lighting up right now and probably will not light it up all season.
Yeah, I
Maybe
wonder what do you think their asking price is? Because like if you're a good team right now with like a somewhat established quarterback, I mean he's a great stash as like just someone to like have on the
right.
roster and learn.
I mean,
And
can't you
if
get him? I don't
yeah,
know,
what do you
third,
think?
fourth round pick now. Can't you get him for a third, fourth round pick?
I mean that if that's the asking price, I would be buying him for sure. Because he's just such a great stash. Like, and I don't know. I mean, I guess if you need quarterback play, like, are you really that comfortable if you have like Jake Browning or I don't know.
Well,
Carson Wentz has been. I mean, we haven't really seen him play. I don't even count the last game to be honest. Like
right.
Tyrod Taylor, Justin Fields. Like, is Anthony Richardson really a downgrade? Much of a downgrade from them right now? I don't know. I think that he's
Depends.
pretty
Yeah,
viable.
I think it depends on how he plays, um,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
yeah,
he has a very minimal sample of being like a good NFL quarterback at this point. Maybe none. I don't know if they, on a couple plays here and there, I would say, but the upside still remains.
absolutely. Connor, wanted to ask you about betting NFL props. Maybe give us a brief view of your process, which props you like to bet, and then give us some sense for how that might have changed this season.
Yeah, for sure. So generally, start my week by just understanding the usage from the prior week. So, and early in the season, it's like kind of based on my priors, like what we thought a player would be coming into the year, as well as what we saw from them, in the previous week. But, at this point, like I think it's basically just understand the usage from the prior week. There's some really good recap shows. Like Underdog does an awesome show with like Josh and Hayden. There's some great articles out there that like basically just recap all like the most important usage notes. In addition to obviously everything that I saw, but like putting, contextualizing with numbers is really important, I think, there too. And then from there, so that's like basically the first thing that I do every week. So like Tuesday morning, Monday, even like looking back at the Sunday games. And then from there, it's like doing my own research into matchups, things to look for, and kind of starts scanning the prop screen. So I'll go game by game, look at different matchups that I think could be viable and that maybe the markets won't react to. I mean, at this point, we're looking at markets for props being released like Wednesday, Thursday-ish for the Sunday games at this point. Now there's super low limits, so it's not something that I'm really acting on too early, to be honest, unless it's widely available. But it's something that I'm kind of starting to keep in mind there. So I'll go through, all the matchups, kind of start taking some notes even without numbers. And then as we get numbers, continue to look through there and look for different situations. A lot of my process is relying on, frankly, unders. So like I bet like 80, 90% unders. Had my best year ever for betting, overall and releasing things last year. And a lot of it, to be honest, was relying more on like uncertainty and betting into uncertainty and the downside outcomes instead of just like pure median projections, which I think is something we touched on last year a little bit and something I lean into a lot more this year. I think, there's good examples of that every week of like, so like week one, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet split, right? So sometimes the books just like line guys because they don't really know, like, okay, well, I think his props should be like both their props should be like 45, 50 yards. But
Okay.
in this instance, like they lined Kenneth Walker, it was like at 65, and they lined Zach Charbonnet at like 35, where like all the preseason reports were like, hey, I think that they could be 1A, 1B, like they could be not. Like no one knows. So it's like an uncertain situation that the books are basically just guessing or using like projection systems. Well, the projection systems are like based off another guess. So like kind of my
Right.
thought process is like, okay, well, for Seattle, they had like a tougher matchup, I believe, that week. I was like, okay, well, there's an out on like, even if he is the 1A, 1B, like he still has to get there with a matchup like, like he has to be efficient against whatever team he's playing against. But if he's not 1A, 1B, or it's like it's flip flop, which it was flip flops, like Charbonnet, I think, played more snaps, got more carries than he did, then like the bet is like insanely plus EV. So I think that there's some like interesting like downside outcomes that are really not impossible to project like on a median outcome, but like very, very difficult just because of like the uncertainty in like NFL week to week. I don't know if that made full sense there, but it's kind of how I've started to like change my approach to like looking at the prop market instead of just like a raw projection versus market basis.
Right. I mean, it sounds like you're looking for situations in which there is downside for a particular player. And I think the example was, I think Kenneth Walker had a bad week 1, right?
He did. Yep.
I forget. My son and I had Kenneth Walker in fantasy, so we weren't thrilled about that week 1. It's been better since Charbonnet got hurt, but yeah, just looking for situations that there's more potential downside, right? I mean, there's just many outs for unders, right, in terms of injury or whatnot, and so in this case, like you're for the in terms of Walker, like your tip was the coaches talking about 1A, 1B, like a more equal share if both of those guys were healthy, right?
Yeah, like that was so. Yeah, it was like usually for these handicaps and stuff. Like there's like a couple of factors. Like okay, well, what's the game script going to be like? According to Vegas spreads, or some of my opinion baked into there as well. Like what's the matchup based on like who's
Right.
playing slash previous metrics. Which I think now we're 3 weeks in, we can probably start to look at things. Like I don't know, success rate allowed, maybe some other metrics as well. Try not to go lean too heavy into that early because it needs a little bit more of a sample size to be better. But like for that example, it was week 1 against the Niners. They were like underdogs. So if they fall behind, they're going to have to throw a lot, right? So then that kind of throws that out of whack too. If Zach Charbonnet plays more than the market's projecting, which he did, then, it's really hard for Kenneth Walker to get 60 yards. So like, obviously that could still lose if you like ripped a random 50-yarder here and there.
Sure.
But like there's multiple ways for us to win there and fewer ways to lose.
Excellent. Connor, is there an NFL bet you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, there's one for the London game. Give the show a little bit more of a shelf life here that I think is interesting. It's Jordan Addison under 3.5 receptions. I think is really interesting. It's pretty widely available right now. They're posting the London games like basically they're like a Saturday Island game. So they posted it way earlier. Pretty widely available across the board. But so Addison's returning from his suspension, but the situation is so much different than last year. So 2024, Addison had 4 receptions in just 7 of his 16 games on the team. But that team had the 3rd highest pass rate over expectation at plus 5.9%. So they were just passing like way more, no matter the situation. And Sam Darnold was also playing pretty well. Like he was an efficient quarterback for, I think, almost all but 2 games of last season. Now Jordan Addison is coming to a situation where the Vikings had the 5th lowest pass rate over expectation. They started low with JJ McCarthy. They kept that going with Carson Wentz, obviously in a blowout as well. But again, pass rate over expectation, encapsulates the situation there. So they also are currently fewest pass attempts per game, 21.7, and Carson Wentz is starting quarterback. So like less efficient quarterback play. They're passing way less. And he still has tough target competition, if not tougher than what he had last year with Hawkinson, Jefferson, Jalen Naylor, and Adam Thielen all playing. So I think that this game could be pretty slow too. Steelers play in London, near bottom pass rate over expectation themselves. So 25th for the Steelers. So might be just like less overall play volume in general. I'm honestly not convinced that Addison like sees 4 targets, let alone 4 receptions here. We have like 2.7 projected. And he could have like a big play. I think that he's actually like ripe for like a long, deep play. And I'm going to play under receptions. I also might do like a uncorrelated, like a negatively correlated one, because the Steelers secondary hasn't been good. But I think the
Right.
targets that Addison will see will be deep downfield. So maybe like an under 3.5 receptions,
Nice.
50 or 60 yards, something like that too. Because I think both those are good. But if you have to bet one, I would say the receptions are the best bet.
Excellent. Love it. When you talk about projections, is that something you're doing, or is there a 4-for-4 team that works on those?
Yeah, it's 4-for-4's team. They're like it's entirely separate then to our process or to my process personally. So
Okay.
it's kind of interesting. It's something that I think, especially in situations like this, like gives such a good baseline because it, you know, our projections guy, John Paulson, does a great job. He's been doing it for like 15, 20 years for on the fantasy side and DFS side. But like it does such a good job of like, okay, well, if the total's this, the spread's this, like our model can, then show like how many pass attempts per game are you expecting based on, their pass rate and things like that. And then like go like break further down into different granular sections. So when you add a guy like Addison into the lineup here, like I think looking at that baseline that he set up here, is just kind of like a helpful like guiding point there on like where to go with the project with like a bet potentially.
Awesome. Connor, is Indianapolis for real?
I don't know if for real, but I think that they're real enough. So like the game against the Broncos was pretty telling to me. The Broncos I expected to have a really good defense, and Daniel Jones and Indianapolis played really well. I think this game this week against the Rams another great litmus test. So like Daniel Jones just like executing what Shane Steichen needs like perfectly. Jonathan Taylor is making opposing teams' lives difficult. The defense is playing okay. They lost, the slot corner for a couple of weeks, I believe, Kenny Moore recently. So I think their defense, with Lou Anarumo, who obviously got fired from the Bengals, but largely has been like kind of a talent maximizing guy. Like there was previous playoff games where the Bengals, with very little talent, were like, giving Patrick Mahomes and other teams problems just due to like Lou's scheming and random things like that. So I think that no matter the talent, like unless they get to the point where they were at with the Bengals last year, where like they just had nobody out back there.
Right.
Like I think that they're going to be a reasonably competitive defense. So you look at all those factors there. Their division really stinks. Like I'm low on the Jags, the Texans, the Titans are just really. I'm not high on any of those teams. So yeah, like are the Colts going to compete to win in the AFC?
Right.
No, I don't
Right.
think
Right.
so. But like, are they a fine like third tier team? Probably that's going to make the playoffs and maybe win a game in the playoffs. Yeah, I think that's like so. That's where I would have them right now.
Fascinating. I think Daniel Jones is really interesting right now because he's kind of been an average quarterback in at least in some of the metrics that I've come up with and looked at, when
Yeah,
I adjust for opposing defenses. And that's what's interesting about the NFL is that if you're average, like that's pretty good. Like you have to be an amazing athlete, an amazing quarterback to just simply get to the NFL and warrant playing time, right? And then all of a sudden you can have some of these average guys just break out. I think we saw that with Baker Mayfield last year. I think people would argue that he's done it for 2 years, but my numbers really like last year as opposed to the year before. I think Cam Newton had 1 year where he took his team to the Super Bowl.
yep.
And now we're seeing like this Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is also pretty good as like first 4 or 6 games as a rookie. Like he really came out and kind of lit it up, right?
Yeah, I think it's crazy because you see some of these like quarterbacks who are like retreads that end up like having pretty good careers. Baker, Geno,
Right.
Daniel Jones maybe at this point. Like I think situation matters so much for quarterbacks, and there's just like so few quarterbacks that can overcome a bad situation that it's like it's really hard to judge in like a vacuum because like I don't think Daniel Jones is very good, but I think he was given he wasn't given a fair shake, I guess, if that makes sense.
And with the New York Giants.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And now you put him in like a I don't even know if like the I don't even know if the Cold situation is like awesome, right? Like
Right.
it's good. Like entering the year, we thought like, okay, it's fine. You got a good rookie tight end. You got a couple of decent pass catchers. Jonathan Taylor is always a nice asset to have, and the line's like above average. And so those are all good things, but it doesn't matter if the quarterback play stinks, which we saw from Anthony Richardson and whatever they tried out last year. But he's making the most of it. So I don't know if he's a maximizer by chance, but I think that he's like, yeah, he's fine and he's playing really well right now.
Yeah. This reminds me of the Athletic had a great article. I think it's called like the bus profiles or something like that. And they talk about the development of young quarterbacks. obviously you lead with Anthony Richardson right now and what they've done with him. I think this was before the start of the season. It's one of isn't it's like one of those tabs you have on your phone because you want to read it at some point. But it was fascinating in Peyton Manning talking about being in the right situation. Like he is convinced that if he had been a year older and gone the year before to like the Giants, like it would have never worked out, right?
Wow.
High expectations. And Bruce Arians was his quarterback coach or offensive coordinator or something like that his first year when he struggled as a rookie in Indianapolis. And Arians legitimately told him, the punter is your friend. So like even someone like Peyton Manning, who obviously had a lot of success eventually, like he needed the right situation coming into the league, like not expecting you to make the playoffs, that first year, right? And yeah, I always loved like Kellen Moore as a quarterback, like coming out of college and
Right.
and I always thought like, well, is this guy ever going to get in the right situation? He's kind of short. I mean, that doesn't help. Um, I don't know. That was always a guy that I thought could have potentially been decent, but it's obviously
Totally.
really hard to play quarterback in the NFL. And yeah,
And
situation
there's
matters.
so much stuff too that we just like don't see. Again, I already mentioned like as we're like outsiders, right? So we're like,
Right.
we see things through the lens of the media, of whatever, like Hard Knocks, any like things that we see on the field if you go to a game. You really don't know like what are these players like what's their mentality, what's like how much are they actually working on shit in the background. Like I believe that they all work fairly hard to some extent, right? But like
Sure.
there's like certainly some quarterbacks are more prepared. Like we didn't know that Johnny Manziel was just like doing the crazy shit he was doing, like when at the time, right? Like,
Right.
everyone was like, wow, he fell so far in the draft. Like, yeah, maybe he was a little bit too reckless a prospect, but he comes in and is just like doing crazy stuff all the time and definitely did not have the right mentality. So like Shadur Sanders, another good example right now. Like we have no idea like
Right.
how did he fall to the fifth round? Like how is that even possible? And then he kind of more and more starts coming out about like he told teams not to draft him maybe and like was had some of the worst meetings ever and was like telling people crazy stuff. So there's just things that we can't possibly know that like, are make it really even difficult for us like to fully evaluate quarterback play like in a vacuum.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see if we see Shador on the field this year. I feel like Joe Flacco bought himself a couple more weeks with the
Yep.
miracle win against Green Bay last week,
That was crazy.
which was crazy. Uh, Connor, give us a surprise prediction for the rest of the NFL season.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think we're already like a couple weeks in. So I like don't think there's anything crazy, crazy surprises. But I'm gonna go with despite their injuries right now, I'm gonna go with the 49ers finish with the most wins in the NFC. Just because their
Nice.
schedule is so soft. And like Purdy's coming back this week, which I actually think Mac Jones did a fine job. Purdy's coming back this week. They still have CMC that they can rely on. Ricky Pearsall has developed into a good option. Jawan Jennings should be back. And then you get Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle back. Like, I think this team really can hit its stride in the second half of the season. And I mean, they're already 3-0. So, like, it's every game that they're playing against, even with like 75%, 70% health, they're still better than like almost every team that they're playing. And it's just like, I mean, they got really lucky with how the schedule shook out. And I don't know if they're going to be like, if they're even like a top 3 or 4 team in the league, but I think they're going to win a ton of games just because of who they play.
Connor, you mentioned this on an episode of Move the Line when I was on there because did you ever end up betting like Niners most wins in the NFL at like
Oh
12 to
yeah.
1 or something like that?
Yep. Yeah. I did. I did.
So
Yeah.
first of all, that bet's looking great, right?
Yeah. Right.
And
Exactly. As long as they can stay healthy.
look, and this is my hot take, right? I think I mentioned on that show that like I think San Francisco's a lot better than any of us think they are. I've actually told my members like multiple times, like
Really.
I've told my members multiple times that I think San Francisco was criminally underrated in my preseason numbers. They were 13th. They were about a point and a half better than NFL average. I thought that was crazy low. And like, I'm not really supposed to be like trashing my own numbers. It's kind of how I make a living. But like I've said that. And look, we've been through the season. Like Kittle's out. They haven't seen Ayuk. Kind of nice to have McCaffrey around, right?
Totally.
You got 2 games of Mac Jones, which, his underlying success rate numbers were like pretty good. And after week 3, I do kind of like this ensemble, like how good your team is based on like margin of victory. So basic stuff like team rankings, but also passing success rate, offense, defense, so on and so forth. And this is kind of how I evaluate teams just, without the prior. They're third in the NFL right now. And
Oh man.
And this is like, they were 8th last year when they were 5-11 or whatever they ended up with, or 6-11, right? And like actually legitimate, like I think this team is like legitimately good. Like you bring up the point of the schedule, and I believe that as well. But like, I think this team is pretty good. And you put Kittle and Ayuk back in there if they can contribute whatever. I guess the point is like even with all the injuries they've had on the offense, it kind of seems bad. Like I actually have some Niners friends that have he legitimately told me that this is the worst 3-0 team in NFL history. And I know it kind of seems like that because of these one-score games, right? We're supposed to regress teams that are like, 3-0 in one-score games. No. I think this team is good. I actually have some data to back it up now. I think we're going to continue to see that. Obviously, it's crazy to not have Nick Bosa. That's not good, but they drafted Mikael Williams with the 11th pick. Like, hasn't really been doing well, but obviously the potential there, and Bryce Huff like already has a bunch of sacks this year and like pretty good pressure numbers over the last couple of seasons. So,
I mean, Robert Saleh matters too. I think defensively, I think he's a great defensive coach, but yeah, like I mean, like I think if you look at the schedule here, it's crazy. I mean, you get the Jags this week, who like I think they're way better than, but there's like so many soft games on the stretch. You got Atlanta against home, you got Houston, you got the Giants, you got the Panthers, you got the Browns, you got the Titans. Week 17 against the Bears. Who knows what they'll look like at that point? Like, I mean, that's like half their remaining games are against like the worst teams in the NFL right now, basically.
Yeah, no, for sure. And
so, I don't know how they got gifted this, but like, yeah, if they're any good, like they're going to win 12 games probably.
Yeah. And like cash in on that 12-1 bet that you had this preseason.
That'd be nice.
Connor Allen, thank you so much for your time and joining me on the Football Analytics Show. Please let everyone know where they can get all your good work.
Yeah, you can find me over at 4for4.com and on Twitter at Connor Allen NFL. And yeah, appreciate you having me on, Ed.
Absolutely. You guys do so much good stuff over there. Can you tell everyone real quick about SharpStack and the new products that you guys have at 4for4?
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally loved using it. Like on Saturday, I added some random college football props. So I bet like 4 random guys that were popping at the top of the SharpStack model, like the EV model, basically leverages sharp books against, weaker books or just the market in general. So we got some like way off market prices and 3 out of the 4 cash. So it was awesome. I tweeted it out and was like, I'm going to blindly tail this because the market is saying it's the right decision. And so we built some algorithms there, and it's like a whole new suite of betting tools at SharpStack. So it's super cool. There's a free prop odds screen. There's free market-based projections and free odds screen in general. And then we also have like a EV tool, ARB tool, and a couple of Pick'em optimizer, a couple other things as well that I think are super useful if you're like somewhat serious about betting. And I know you have a code too, right? It's 25% off the whole year with code the Power Rank, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yep, that is correct. Yeah, I've been using it too. I've been featuring it. I've been giving some stuff to my members, giving some stuff out in 5 Nuggets Saturday, and it all makes sense because they're, as Connor mentioned on the show, like it's all unders, right? I don't think I've seen a single prop, NFL prop, where it's betting on an over, like and I look at it.
It's rare,
somewhat frequently, right? And like there's a lot of unders, a lot of things that make sense. I actually had Darius Slayton under 24 under I think it was 24 and a half receiving yards, and I looked it up a little bit. The guy had 3 targets the first 2 games of the season, so that made complete sense. It didn't win because that's how stuff goes sometimes, but yeah, I try to like kind of look into it a little bit. Like if it's suggesting a bet, like I try to look into a little bit like why I might want to make it. The Slayton one is like a good example of that. But it has been a great tool to identify value, and then potentially like the value of just like figuring out which markets are the softest, right? Totally. There's definitely been a lot of quarterback under passing yards, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of the work that you did in the preseason was saying that, for season long bets, quarterback under passing yards is pretty profitable.
Yeah. And like Totally. And just like right now, a quarterback passing yard prop, it's popping. It's like Jalen Hurts is as high as 196 on MGM and Hard Rock. It's as low as 182 at Novig and like 187 FanDuel. So we're talking about like a 15-yard gap between the high and the low, which is, I mean, that's a chasm by NFL standards.
Yeah. I mean, if you can continue to convince Jalen Hurts to never throw the ball down the field, that becomes an even better bet. I think he went away from that a little bit against the Rams last week.
He had to eventually, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you're down, and I had for members of the side, I had Philadelphia -3.5, which was dead. Like, it was just dead the entire second half, and then they block the kick, take it back to the house. So, better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Connor, thanks again for your time. You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Just a reminder, you can get my free sports betting newsletter, 5 Nuggets Saturday. You can sign up for free at thepowerrank.com.